build my own vapor blaster, I said. It'll be easy, I said. Just get some parts, put them together. Yeah, story of my life. Welcome to Wednesday. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the ThePirateRagnar MotoVlog channel. My name is Alistair, and astute viewers to this channel will remember that I was supposed to have an update about that bad boy the Wednesday after the last post. I mean, I don't think I promised it or anything. And by next Wednesday, I will 100% have some updates on the progress on a couple of these parts. But regardless, I am full of what I believe to be very good reasons for the delay.
Those are called excuses.
Semantics. Anyways, I have gotten some pretty decent results on a couple of parts that I've been working on, but the chamber only works for a little while before something seems to go off. Something with the flow of the air, or the water, or the slurry mixture, or any of the various moving parts and components in that thing. So what I'd like to do today is just look at a couple of the hiccups that I've run into, things that, you know, everyone that's gonna try and build their own vapor blaster is also going to run into, and things that I probably should have researched long before I got this far into the project. Let's get into it. All right, first thing I have to do though is I just need to get this desk cleaned up, because I want to go through each of the parts and the components that isn't working and kind of explain the things that I've learned and hopefully prevent you guys from going through the same headaches that I went through when I decided to build my own vapor blaster. All right. Okay, so just a kind of general discussion, I guess, about what hasn't worked properly. The most obvious thing is that I should have done a lot more research. I don't have any experience really with vapor blasting at all, and the only sandblasting experience I have is on really big farm equipment that no one cared if it got a little dinged up or the finish wasn't perfect because it was just gonna get spray painted like orange or whatever anyway. Wasn't a big deal. So I have literally no technique whatsoever, and as a result I don't have a full understanding of what it takes to run one of those things. So there's a few serious misunderstandings that I had initially. When I've done sandblasting in the past, the media that was used coarse and quite large. So when I bought the sandblast cabinet, it came with a bunch of silica, crushed glass, silica sand mix that the gentleman was using, and I made an assumption that I could continue using that. Well, it's definitely not the case. As an example, this is material that I've already sifted the largest pieces out of. I could go out into the bin there and get the really big coarse material that I was trying to send through the water pump and through the hose, and then blasting these parts at like 90 PSI. So many things wrong with that statement, but I didn't know that to begin with. After doing some research, I learned what material I should be using. Now, again, this is a blanket statement. I'm making a statement like there's one kind of material that you would use for absolutely every purpose, and that's of course not the case. There's a whole bunch of subtlety here. Generally speaking, I'm looking for something more like this. Oh, I haven't opened this yet, that's why. Okay. So, this is more the consistency of the material that I want to be using, apparently. Like you can't compare these two things, right? So this is glass bead media, and this is just crushed glass or silica. So there's problem number one, is I'm using the wrong media. And that leads to a whole bunch of other problems, particularly with the really coarse stuff like this. this pipe was getting clogged up terribly at this T-bend. Obviously a Y-bend would have been better because it doesn't affect the flow so drastically. I couldn't find that at Home Depot, and I'm sure they're more expensive anyway. So I used a T-bend. That causes all whole kinds of problems. And then where this bad boy connects with the nozzle also caused just as many problems. You'd get the media backing up here. And of course, because the media that I'm using is coarse and irregular, has all kinds of weird shapes and things, that it has a tendency to build up on the sides, like anywhere you have a seam between two connections, two containers that it's flowing through. So at every single seam, you'd get one little piece that got stuck, and then that would catch one or two more pieces. And before you know it, a few minutes into trying to vapor blast stuff, nothing's coming out of the nozzle anymore. Obviously that's a problem. So that was another issue that I had. Air compressor that I'm using. I really like that air compressor, I really do, but it's not the right one for this. It's just not. The total capacity of it isn't large enough, and so I run out of air very, very quickly. And the issue that I had initially is that my setup didn't allow me to quickly turn the air on and off. Once it was hooked up, it was just gonna dump air until I unhooked it. I then eventually decided to take a valve that I'd originally installed right here to control the secondary output, which I'll explain in a second. I took that and attached it to the nozzle. That allowed me, while my hands were actually in the vapor blaster itself, to be able to turn the air on and off and at least allow the air pressure to build up again, but it was not a very convenient way of doing it. And again, it's kind of not an on-off very quickly type thing. Anyway, it wasn't an optimal solution. The actual reservoirs that I was using, they were much larger, square reservoirs, hold a lot of water. I believed that I needed that, and I think I'm going to start running into issues with water volume if I go this route, but it's the only thing I can think of, so it's the next thing I'm gonna try, is instead of using those very large reservoirs where all of the material ends up getting stuck on the outside, and then it settles on the outside, and then your slurry is not really slurry anymore, it's mostly just water because everything settles outside of the area that you can agitate. That's what the second line here is for. This line comes down to a single drilled hole that was attached to a metal plate that I just had in the reservoir, so that it was jetting across the bottom of the reservoir when the pump was on, and hopefully agitating things. And in fairness, it worked to the degree in which this could reach, but it couldn't reach the entire reservoir. It couldn't possibly reach all the corners at the same time. Inevitably, there was a buildup of sediment and material in areas that made it useless to the actual process. That leads me to the next thing that I learned. There's a difference, apparently, between an open loop system and a closed loop system. And what I've built myself here is a closed loop system, which is not as good. It's much easier to build. It has some serious drawbacks, which are that you're circulating the same water that has all the crap you pulled off of the parts. You're still circulating that through everything. And the result is you're effectively blasting some of your media at the objects, as well as some of the dirt and the oil and everything from before. What an open system allows is for the filtration of the water that you're using. And it allows you, in essence, to enter more water into the equation without having to worry about your system overflowing. If I wanted to hose down parts in this thing, that's why I was using such a large reservoir, and I wasn't filling them completely to begin with, because I knew after I was finished working on those parts, I was going to want to hose them down. The moment you start hosing them down, you're adding water into the system. So if your reservoir is already full, it's going to overflow, and then you're losing the valuable media that you have to blast the objects. You're losing it just because it spills off onto the ground, and it's much harder to recollect that way. What a closed loop system doesn't do is allow you to add extra water without some kind of issue with your system. I don't have a way right now of resolving that problem. We're going to continue with a closed loop system for now. I still have a lot to learn about vapor blasting and perfecting this whole process anyway. So I'm going to worry about filtering all the water and those kinds of things. Maybe that can be a DIY vapor blaster Mark II or something. But what we're going to do is we're going to own our mistake, you know, and we're just going to move forward, closed loop system. But we got some modifications that we're going to make, some things that we're going to do to resolve all the issues that I've run into, and hopefully really start being able to get some nice finishes. This is, I think it's pretty nice. And it was with something that clearly doesn't work yet. So I'm so excited to be able to get the parts in there and actually start using them on a system that works the way it's intended to. The biggest thing for me right now in terms of what I want to share with you guys is I kind of want to find out if this idea really is viable for people who really only want to get into it for maybe 1 or 2 projects. At this point, I'm a little pessimistic on the whole thing because I've made so many mistakes. You know, if you don't make all the same mistakes that I do and you don't waste any money in a couple of places where I've done that, it's still a pretty hefty investment. There's a few of these things that even if you get the cheap Chinese version of the part, it still adds up over time. You're looking at bare minimum, even if you don't get a really big cabinet like mine, the total cost of all those parts adds up pretty quickly. The amount of money that you're going to sink into a project like this in order to create a cabinet that you can use over and over and over again is awesome, as long as you're going to use it over and over and over again. So at this point, I can already tell you that if you've got that one engine, that one bike that your heart tells you you have to restore, you need to get it brought back to its former glory, but you don't think it's going to be something you're going to do a whole bunch of times, I would strongly recommend just bringing that to a local shop and having someone there vapor blast it for you. It's going to be less than it's going to cost you to build your own cabinet, and it's going to be a much better job probably than your first attempt at vapor blasting something, because the person you're bringing it to hopefully has some technique and some skill and knows what they're doing. So I'm not trying to discourage anybody from doing the hands-on do-it-yourself. It's what I love to do. I'd love everybody else to be encouraged to do that kind of thing as well. But sometimes, you know, local businesses also need our patronage, and maybe that's one of those things where it'd be a great opportunity to go to a local business instead of trying to build your own, if it's really only like the one project that you're working on. As soon as you start talking about multiple bikes though, the cost of sending those engines out to be vapor blasted adds up itself pretty quickly. And I think as soon as you start getting into 2 projects, or for sure 2, and maybe you think you might do a 3rd or something, then yeah, maybe build your own vapor blaster, because in the long run, you're gonna save a lot of money. That's what I'm really hoping that we can prove here. We'll find out if this is actually viable, or if by the next video, I'm just telling you about more money that I need to spend to even make it work. We'll see. So stick with me. The things that I actually have to do in order to make this work. Sadly, these don't fit. The gentleman that was using the sandblaster before was clearly using buckets that were a slightly different dimension. So I have to cut out a little bit of the frame at the bottom of, not the frame, but a little bit of the skirting at the bottom of the sandblaster cabinet so that these can slide in and out without any problem. I also have some thicker hose. So we're moving to a different media. I've sifted all of the crushed glass and stuff, so I have the smallest of the material here, that if there are parts where there's a lot on it or it's a more heavy duty part, I would consider experimenting with it once I know this works. But I know right now the parts that I'm needing to clean, I need to clean with this. And so that's why we'll be doing that. I still think it would be well served to go ahead and bring this up to a proper diameter hose. So that's what we're gonna do. Going to upgrade the water line so that we don't run into issues with it being backed up. The next thing I've done is I've found a pneumatic pedal. So it's gonna come at the cost of some airflow. CFMs are probably going to suffer as a result of this. I'm not sure how great the porting is on the actual part in here, but I think it's something that's worth the cost, because you know we'll be able to, when needed, we can apply air, and when it's not needed or when the compressor needs to charge back up a little bit, I don't have to, you know, completely get It's so frustrating. Just please understand that this is, I'm also hoping that it works because this was the cheapest one, not the cheapest, but almost the cheapest one that I could find that had a reasonable rating and didn't have people telling me that it was stopping, like it stopped working after going above like 15 PSI or something. I don't think this would hold 90 PSI, which is fine because apparently when you're using this kind of media anyway, that's way too much. You're probably looking at something closer to 40 or 50 PSI. Hopefully this is gonna work. I'm really, really hopeful. I think I sunk about 20 bucks into it, so it's not the end of the world if it doesn't work. I just don't know where else I'm going to get one because I can't find one locally. It sucks. That is what we're gonna do for the airline to resolve that problem. I mentioned already, but I will go over again. We are going to use these as our reservoir. Main reason really is because the pump intake diameter is about that big. Or the footprint of it, at least, is about that big. So it pulls in from right outside a diameter of about that large, which means that it's almost perfect for these containers. The only issue we're gonna run into is just volume. The amount of water that I have in here. Once the pump starts functioning, and once it's spraying water up into the top end of the cabinet, and it's been running for 30 seconds or so, it takes gravity a little bit of time to slowly bring all that water back down into the reservoir. So I'm worried that within that 30 seconds, 45 seconds before the water starts to pour back in, that it doesn't deplete all of the water in here. It's a pretty powerful pump, so it could. If that's the issue that we run into, then I'm gonna have to probably get like, because you can get these larger, so you can get 6 gallon or 8 gallon ones, I believe, but I would have to put the cabinet up on something because it's not high enough for that. So that will be a whole different issue. I'm hoping we don't need to go there, but we'll see. So let's just, I guess, obligatory montage of me doing that. And there we go. Research done, better late than never, I suppose, though that's kind of shameful on my part. We have the correct media, we have the correct containers, we have the correct hose now. Hopefully we have the correct solution to our air supply problem. Everything is starting to fall into place, and I'm hoping that I've come to the last little hurdle of finding the gremlins that keep popping up in the system so that we can get it really, really going. And I can show you how awesome the finish we can get on some of these parts are and just how almost factory new they're gonna look when we put them in. I'm really, really excited about that. Obviously, I'm a little frustrated that I don't have that to show you guys already, but progress. I wanted to show you guys, I wanted to share it with you. So if you do like the content that you're seeing on this channel, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. All of that kind of engagement really, really helps this channel grow and find new viewers, and I genuinely appreciate it. And just remember, with these old vintage beasts, a little bit of elbow grease goes a long way. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Pirate Ragnar MotoVlog channel. My name is Alistair. I just smacked the microphone, didn't I?